Well, you know what? Maybe we just start with Genesis. To like, it's like the book. It's the book of the Bible. We start with Genesis. Now, Genesis has, I mean, all the stories. It's got all the stories. It's got the from all the way from creation to the patriarchs to Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat, the flood, the craziest stories. There's so much packed into Genesis. It's actually crazy. And like, I don't know. Genesis is a book that I've read many, many, many times. And for that reason, it is clearly an S tier book. Genesis is a book that I feel like everybody knows multiple stories from at all times. And like you could quote stories from Genesis at like any given time whatsoever. So for me, Genesis is clearly a great to read book. It's like actively enjoyable to read Genesis all the time. It can be difficult, of course. Every book of the Bible can be difficult depending on what you're studying for, what you're reading for. But like, I don't know, if when I remember like the children's Bible being read to me, you remember all the stories from Genesis. Genesis is an awesome book of the Bible. Another one that I just want to grab to get out of the way is the Gospel of John down here, which I'm going to put just above Genesis because the Gospel of John is my favorite book of the Bible, I think. We're going to do some review here, and I'm going to see if I would put anything a little bit higher. And John and Genesis go together so well because they open in the exact same way on purpose. Like John specifically edits the beginning of his Gospel, or writes the beginning of his Gospel to sound like the beginning of Genesis, and he's tying together the Old and the New Testaments, and it's just so cool. The book of John is my favorite. I have an entire video going through the Gospel of John, so if that's something that you're interested in, I believe it's called The Theology of Love, or something like that. Yeah, so I did basically like a 40-minute commentary on the Gospel of John, on parts of the Gospel of John. So that's a really cool video, and it's just a little deep dive into why I love the Gospel of John. It's an amazing book. I think it just gives the most personal portrayal of Jesus, and for that reason, it's just like so valuable and so cool in so many ways. So I highly recommend John. Highly recommend Genesis. Those are some fun to read books. Exodus. Do you know? It's a fave. Exodus has perhaps the greatest narrative ever. I don't know. Like it's the best story ever, probably. I mean, it's been literally like stolen by Hollywood and made into like 18 successful movies. Like you have like the 10 Commandments, and then you have like the awful adaptation by the British director who did Gladiator. How do I know that but not know his name? But I do know his name. And Alien, and all of the things that he does. You know when you just blank on something that you literally know every day? Why do I'm mad now? Please. Ridley Scott. So then you have the awful Exodus movie by Ridley Scott. You have, I don't know, there's like 18 renditions of Exodus. You have Prince of Egypt, which is just an incredible, incredible animated movie. You have Jordan Peterson's full Bible roundtable session on Exodus, which is one of the greatest things I've ever attended. It's just to hear the massive opinions on it's such a profound book. It's such a profound and storied book. It's really incredible. For me personally, I like I like so many things about Genesis that I'm not going to put it higher than Genesis, but it's certainly, they're right on par. Like Exodus, everything in Exodus is just incredible. The story of Exodus is incredible. Like every kid knows all the story beats of Exodus, and it's just a wild book from the time it starts to like chapter 20. After that, it maybe slows down a little bit, but from 1 to 20, like that's a crazy book. Like you go like right into, there was some kids, they were trying to kill them all. One of them got saved. He grew up and became a king. He killed someone. He ran away. He sees the burning bush. He talks to God. God sends him back to the person. He's rejected by his own people. He's rejected by the Pharaoh. 10 plagues on Egypt, miraculous signs, and everybody knows the signs and the wonders, and they know, let my people go, and then they go to worship in the desert, but Pharaoh gets mad and pursued. Like, everybody could quote this, like, off the top of their head, like, instantaneously. Like, even non-Christian people. Exodus is profound, and for that reason, it's obviously going up there. The Synoptic Gospels, you could really pick up and read any of them to get details about Jesus' life, and they're all great, and they're all amazing. But I also just really love Luke. I love Luke's writing style, and for that, he's going to go in amazing. I'm going to put him down below Exodus, but I think that his gospel account is just awesome. And I really like the historical perspective. I really like the perspective. He clearly has sources that are the like female followers. He clearly, because he's a Gentile, I think he has different views of like female authority than the Jews do. And so he kind of comes into this without that constraint, and he's like sees no reason why he shouldn't talk to and get the like circumstantial evidences from the female followers. And so he clearly is talking to like Mary, the mother of Jesus, and Mary Magdalene, because he has this information on the beginning of Mary's life when she goes to see Elizabeth, like all of that stuff's recorded in Luke. The female followers are writing the tomb, all of that's recorded in Luke. And the salvation of Mary Magdalene from demons is recorded in Luke. And there's a lot of awesomeness that adds to the story. So in Luke, you're just getting a really well thought out history, also because it's being thought out in two parts, and we'll get to the second book later. But it's just so good. And if I was going to read the Gospels, this is the order that I would pick. Like if you had it to tell me I could only read two of the Gospels, or if you told me that you could only have two of the Gospels for like evidence of Jesus, I'd put John and Luke at the top. Then you get one of the synoptics, which I think happens to keep the best synoptic track of things. And then you get one non-synoptic gospel, which gives you the essence into the life of Christ. And you can recreate most of the material from that. But then, of course, having 4 dialogues on Jesus' life is just completely invaluable. And there's so many good stories in Matthew and Mark, I'm sure that I could separate out and you just see how amazing they are. So that seems right to me. Okay, let's get back out into some other books that we know. Let's just grab Revelation here. Let's just do it because I know where I want to put it, and that's in faves. Now you're gonna say I have a lot in faves, but this is the Bible. That's also why these tiers don't go down. It's not like I didn't want to do like A, B, C, D, E, F or something like that, because there's no F tier Bible books. Like we're talking about like my favorites, and then we're talking about some good ones. Also, are these colors like backwards, or is that just the way that they did it? I don't know. We're talking about my favorites, and then everything else is good. It's just to what degree would I want to read it. So we're not dealing with bad here, but I love the book of Revelation. It also happens to be written by my favorite author, and maybe there's some coincision there. There was a time in my life where I was so interested in Revelation. I've changed my perspective on it now, but I just found it so fascinating. This stuff was in the Bible, and my church wasn't talking about it. I'm like, what? Why are you trying? This is the coolest thing I've ever read in my life. Like as a kid who was interested in like, I don't know, like fantasy and fiction. Like I love superheroes, and I loved like Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter. Like as a lover of those things as a kid, I'm like, why the frick aren't we teaching Revelation, dude? This book is so interesting. And now I know, as a theologian, not a theologian, as a student of theology, I know why we're not teaching Revelation. That's because nobody actually knows what happens in Revelation. Here's a secret for you: pastor actually doesn't know what's happening in Revelation. He's just teaching it for funsies. Because I think God gives us just enough clues to have an idea of what this future is going to look like, but to actually split it down and say here's exactly what the end times are going to look like is a silly thing to do. It's a silly thing to do, but Revelation is the most metal book of the Bible ever, and it's super fun to read, in my opinion. I would literally sit down and read Revelation for fun. Like I'd be in church, and I would be, if I was bored as a kid, call this good or bad. You know, I wasn't listening to the pastor because I got bored, but I literally would read through the entire book of Revelation in one sermon. It's about how long it takes if you read it just like a narrative straight through. Is about like 30-40 minute sermon. You could read through the book of Revelation. So it was a fun activity. And for that, it needs to go in faves, and I'm going to put it right where it is. Right where it is? Above Luke. It's hard to say. Well, you know what? I was going to say that the Gospels are so amazing because they're the story of what Jesus did for us. And that, don't get me wrong, that's amazing. But do you know what is also amazing is the second coming of Christ. And that's what Revelation is about. Like, I'm just as excited for the second coming of Christ as I am happy about the first. And I feel like that's the way we're supposed to be. So I don't feel bad about putting it a little bit higher. It's somewhere in there, and that's where I'm going to keep it. This is not going to be an exact sharp. We're just having some fun, but I think that looks good. That seems proper. Let's do 1st and 2nd Samuel. I'm going to group these two together because I feel like it's hard to read 1st and 2nd Samuel apart. The story is just so interconnected. The narrative of David's life is basically what most of it is. Although there's also a lot of focus on like Eli and Samuel at the beginning of 1st Samuel, and then focus on like Saul and Solomon. But 1st and 2nd Samuel are just another amazing narrative. I feel like they have to go in faves. Like how can the David story not be in faves, right? Yeah, I think so. I think first and second Samuel both have to go up there. Great books, amazing narrative. I'm gonna put them towards the bottom, because I just think David is such an awesome story to study. But I think I'd pick those other ones over it. So first and second Samuel for sure. Maybe first Samuel over second Samuel, because I actually think that the story of like David's upbringing is in some ways more interesting than David's life. But it's hard really to say that David's life as king. I mean, um, I'll just keep them in that order. I like that. I like that quite a bit. Quite a bit. Jonah. Jonah's another amazing. I'm actually going to put it at the bottom of my favorites. I think that's proper. I think Behind David is proper just because of its maybe shortness and succinctness. But Jonah to me it's like a comedy. It's so good. It's like, first of all, he gets the idea that he can run from God, which is just silly. And every Israelite who would have read that would know how silly that is. It's the same thing as like in the Garden of Eden. They already knew that they couldn't hide from God in the Garden of Eden. So like Jonah running from God and thinking he's going to sail to Tarshish and then be away from God is hilarious. And then it also gets into a comedy, like it's like a comedic tragedy at the end of it, where he's like so upset that the Lord has saved these people, and he's just upset about it under a tree, and then the Lord takes away the tree. If you watch like the Veggie Tales of this, I feel like it's just so memorable. And Jonah is just such a memorable story, and I think it's an S tier story for certain. I feel like that would be good. James is amazing. James is so good. I feel like as much as I love stories, I also love good teaching, and James has to go high. It just has to go high. It's so good. It's so good. I'm going to put it just ahead of Luke. That feels proper to me. James is such a good book of the Bible. It starts out talking about him praying for wisdom and then getting it, and then the rest of the book is just a ridiculous amount of wisdom. It's like the wisest book, and you can read this. You could sit down and read like any passage from James, and you'd be like, wow, like everything in James is as good as anything in the Proverbs. It's like wisdom literature in the New Testament, and it's just so good. I really really like the book of James, and I think that you could teach like an infinitesimal amount of sermons out of James. I'm thinking one or two more could go in there. I'm thinking Daniel. Daniel has to go in favorites. The book of Daniel is so cool, and for like I said with Revelation, like that's where I'm gonna put it too. It's gonna go like right behind Revelation because, first of all, the stories in the first part of Daniel are so cool, but then the stuff about like the supernatural entities in the second half of Daniel is like, what are we talking about? And so to a kid, reading Daniel is pretty much the same as reading Revelation. You're like, why are we not talking about this? We've got like princes like literally fighting each other, and one of them gets captured, and then Michael has to rescue him, and then that one can come talk to Daniel, and then he has to go back and help Michael fight a different one. Like, what? That's crazy. And that's awesome. We should talk about it more. And let alone two of probably the greatest stories in Scripture, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace, and Daniel in the lion's den, which are essentially the same story twice, it's just awesome. It's awesome. Daniel's an awesome book of the Bible. So I think that was pretty interesting. What are your favorite books of the Bible, and what are your thoughts on some books of the Bible? So I would say if you enjoy this video and you're still watching at this point, leave me some comments to let me know, A, your favorite book of the Bible, and B, one of the books of the Bible that I ranked low that you think I should reconsider because of a certain content in it, or something that I'm missing, or something that I didn't know would be great to remember, because there's just so many things, so many amazing things to remember and to learn about the Bible. The Bible is the greatest book of all time, composed of all these books. And yeah, I feel pretty good about this tier list. And I guess maybe I'll move my face a little bit just for the ending here, so that you can see all of them. That's the final chart there, where we've got everything. I think probably I could have maybe bumped, I felt bad about putting books in mid. Maybe I'll call this mid. I don't know. Not that I'm gonna save this chart or anything, but to me that feels good. So it'll be documented here in the video format. So I think that's pretty interesting. If you have been, thank you for watching. If you're interested in more tier lists, this is kind of an idea for content that I sort of want to keep up with. It's very fun to do. It's very fun to like go through this, and it's sort of like jog your memory on each of the books of the Bible and try to like remember specific details about each of the books of the Bible. So this was super fun to do. If you have been, thank you for watching. Consider subscribing, liking, or following along to the channel. If you're interested in more content, I'm just a young Christian who is studying theology and trying to share that in the world in this way. This is my one of my ways of ministering right now, and it's just something I really enjoy doing. So that's all I have to say, and I hope you have a good one.